And one of the great things about it is it breaks the photograph down so you can begin to see some of this stuff. So it shows you, that, in this case, the values, and in this case, it shows you the detail.
Camera's recording.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And now we're back to color again. Let's see if I can go to, it gives you, oh, this is just black and white. So in a sense, it's like doing a value sketch. So I find it to be a very, a very handy thing, although it doesn't take the place of a value sketch, because when you do a value sketch, you learn about your subject, whereas this is kind of like an instant thing, and like so many things that are instant, it leaves some things behind. And learning about your subject is one of the things it leaves behind. But it is handy to have in many cases, and I use it a lot. And
program?
Excuse me?
Is that a particular program that you use on the iPad?
Yes, it's a fairly inexpensive program. I think it's called Value Viewer, and I think it's like $4.95 or something like that. It was designed by a painter, so it really has something. It wasn't just something that just happened. The person who designed it had in mind what it really does. So it's.
How new an iPad is it?
Excuse me?
How new is that iPad?
Is it new iPad?
This iPad is 2 years old, maybe.
Oh, okay, so it's not the newest one?
No, probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. I'm usually behind pretty much everything. I don't know what that's doing there. There it goes. You keep pounding it and it goes away. It does what you want eventually. What I've chosen to do is a piece of what I intend to be a bigger painting. But I wanted to be able to do it in the time that we have here. And also I wanted to do it something that would cover most of the applications of watercolor to paper. So I wanted to cover a graded wash, a variegated wash, a little bit of calligraphy. I wanted to cover the viscosity of watercolor, some of it ranging from tea to almost yogurt, where I use it in accents. So that's why I chose this particular subject. It also, a couple of people have mentioned my skies, and skies and water are the same thing in how you paint them. They're both graded washes, and they both have some variegated color added to them. So it's really basically the same idea. And I also, there's always a hot spot somewhere, because it gives a sense of, in a sky, it gives a sense of air, and I try and keep my skies so that I think I can breathe them. That's how I sort of judge them. I look at it and say, can I breathe that? And if I feel that's working, then I'm happy about it. And that usually comes from a hot spot somewhere, a light spot. And the same thing is true of water, because if you give it a light spot here and there, and you'll see it as I go, it gives a translucency that just a clean, simple wash just doesn't give. I've already put masket on the whites in here, and mostly I don't usually use masket, but I did it because I'm trying to save time, and you don't want to watch me paint all those little things in there, but that's probably how I would normally approach it. One of the things that I find that's so amazing and wonderful about watercolor is the fact that it's an adventure every time. You never know what's going to happen. I haven't a clue as to how this is going to work out. I mean, I got my fingers crossed, but I really don't know what's going to happen. I have a plan, and you always have to have a plan, but plans go awry very quickly. In oils, you know, you mix a kind of a green, and it's green, it stays there. And you put it on the canvas, and it's still green, and it still stays there. With watercolor, that's not true. It changes. It's so dynamic, and of course, that's its fascination. For me, anyway, it's truly an adventure, and it's also more like a performance rather than a painting, because it's like playing something, because you can't take it back. You know, you play something wrong, and you're stuck with it. So that to me is what is some of the exciting parts of watercolor, and so here we go.
Can I ask what kind of masking you use, masking fluid?
I don't really know, because I don't use it very often, but it's called Mascoid,
Okay.
and it's on a little jar. Like I said, I rarely use it, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to work. I'm hoping it's going to come up. I did it a couple of days ago just to make sure that it was done in time, and so we'll all learn about it together. So first thing I'm going to do, now I have my major wash is a greenish blue. And that's pretty much what it is right there. And if you can see that I can thin it down and it becomes very light. And it's made up of alizarin crimson and a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of phthalo blue, because that has a transparency that the others don't give you. And when I'm dealing with something that's transparent, I try and add a little bit of transparent color. I work mostly with cadmium colors, and they're, as you know, very opaque colors. So you have to be very careful with them, and you have to back off their density. But they offer, you know, some very beautiful and some realistic colors. So you can see what's happening with a variegated wash in there, and that's really a word. I didn't think that was a word, so I looked it up, and it means mixing colors. That's what it means. It really is a word. I thought it was something that somebody arbitrarily made up. So this is where my plan, and we'll see how it works. So the first thing I'm going to do is wet the paper. I'm going to wet it down. I'll cover pretty much everything. I'm going to wet it down really only to the edge of the water here, so I still have some control over what's happening. I don't like to get too much water on it, but,
What kind of paper are you using?
excuse me?
What kind of paper are you using?
This is Arches 140 rough. I pretty much use rough paper now because it's more similar to 300-pound cold press, and so it makes the transition easier for me. And I also have come to like it. I've been on a few workshops with some people that I admire, and they use 140-pound rough. So while I spent most of my time, my years painting using cold press, I've changed that to rough, and it's just something I really like. So now I have to I want to make sure that it stays light at the top. So I'll start with the wash being fairly light. This is where my light is coming from, and that's just something that I arbitrarily decided. This is the most fun part of it all, because, it's like being a kid again, you know?
What kind of brush are you using?
What's that?
Very soft brush you're using.
This brush is a rabbit. I think it's a rabbit. No, it's not a rabbit. It's a squirrel. It's a squirrel brush. It's Isabie, and they're these, I'm not sure what they call them, but I've come to really like them. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to leave that alone. So I've got a kind of a graded wash, but I'm going to want it to be a little bit darker here. And I'm putting in a little extra color, maybe a little yellow, and a little more blue. And I'm starting to let it run towards the top. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm doing it in a diagonal direction because I want the light effect still to come from here. So I run it back in this direction, and then I run it back towards the bottom. So I'm getting something of a variegated and graded wash. Now I just have to clean this up a little bit. Somebody was asking me about how you do a sky. This is how you do a sky. It's pretty much done. You know, if I were doing a sky, it would be blue. And what I would do is I would make sure that there's an area that's brighter, so I wouldn't paint a part of it. I'd save it for the end, and then I'd let the paint come back into it, but it would keep it light, and without it being, without it being something that's blotted, which I really don't want to happen. So I see this, and I don't want to lose this paint, so I'm going to, every so often, I'm going to let it run back. Now, I was talking to you about light before, and I always want to keep some light in my wash. See what I did with it. Yeah, so I had one here. And I had one here. That looks pretty crude, but it usually heals itself. The thing when you do big washes like this, you have to be careful because it hides underneath if you use tape, which I do, it hides underneath the tape. If you use clips, it will hide underneath the clips. So I always remind myself that never to turn my back on a watercolor. It's like the Pacific Ocean. Because the minute I turn my back, something really bad's going to happen. It's going to leak out somewhere. Something awful will take place. Now you notice that I'm letting it run back and forth, up and down. And part of it is I'm trying to control the amount of color down here, down at the bottom, because I want more color here and less color up here. But also what I'm doing is I'm letting it sink into the grain of the paper, and that gives you a nicer wash. You know, people look at my skies and they say, how do you get it so, so even? And this is the way. And the part of it is to keep it wet enough, and part of it is to let it move from left to right, up to down, back and forth. I constantly keep it moving.
Could I ask about with the paper, did you stretch it in any way, or is it
No,
dry paper with tape?
No, I don't stretch paper anymore. That's something I used to do, and I found it's too much trouble, and it's really not necessary for the most part. If you control the amount of water, you usually can keep it from doing too much. There's not much. There's a little bit of bending going on, but not an awful lot, and not where it's going to cause me any trouble. In the beginning, I used to soak it in the bathtub and experiment with 5 minutes or 10 minutes and use that paper tape, which drove me crazy. And I loved when it dried because it was the most beautiful surface. I mean, I loved it. But I found it to be unnecessary. And I found, as I saw other watercolorists work, people that I admired, they didn't do that at all. They either used clips or they taped it down. The reason to tape it is because it gives you a border. And so when I pull that off, there's whiteness of the paper, and that seems to be necessary with watercolor. It gives it a life. If you paint it right to the edge, in my opinion anyway, and in others, you really have to put a mat on top of it because you can't really quite see it. So I've picked this up from a few guys, and that's how I work now. I guess it's one of those things where you can where if you like it, then you do it. If you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. It's just a little too stark, so I wiped it down a bit. That's enough for the time being. Let's hope it dries while I go on to the next. So the next part of it, I'm going to do the, well, you know what I want to do? I want to do a little bit of the, oh, you know, I really swear there's something that causes amnesia in watercolor painting. I don't know what it is, but invariably I forget something. And no matter how many times I say it, no matter how many times I remind myself, I still forget it. One of the things that I always tell everybody is when you paint, have a safe brush. This is my safe brush. And it's an Escoda Perla, they call it. And it's got a very sharp point, as you might see. And that's supposed to be in my left hand, which it wasn't because I forgot. And what it's there for is if something, and it's a damp brush, and if something goes wrong, it's going the wrong way, I need something fast, I don't have to go looking for a brush, and I don't have to go trying to put water on it, and it's not too wet, there's not too much water, and it's not too dry, because it's damp. And I did that already. And I usually keep that in my left hand. And it's I call it my safety brush, so that if something really bad goes wrong, I can quickly, I have something that I can use right away. I find myself and other people I see painting, so often something will go wrong. And of course it always goes wrong. Something always surprises you it's charm. And something goes not the way you think it's going to go. And so you have to be prepared for what happens. And this brush will do that. Because what happens is something goes wrong, and then people go into this, look in their bag, and they're trying to find the other brush, and then they dunk it in the water, and it's got too much water in it, and then they dry it out, then they finally got the brush. In the meantime, the watercolor has dried, and there's this big streak across it, and you can't, it's a little too late. So watercolor is something you really have to be prepared for. You have to think it through. You have to think the steps through. And I say this to myself all the time. And in this case, I've even written the steps down so I wouldn't forget, because I'm probably going to forget. Like I said, there's something about it that there's so many things. There's so many things to consider that I know certainly I forget. So that's one of the things I forgot and didn't tell you. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, what I'm doing now is, see that? See how that's drawing in a way that I hadn't anticipated? But because I didn't go get coffee, I can mitigate it a little bit so that it's not what I planned, it's not what I wanted, but it's there. And it's not going to be awful, because I'll turn it into a little bit of a watermark or something like that. But if I wasn't paying attention and it creeped up and made I love the word cauliflower. I know that they used to call it blossom, but somebody also describes it as a cauliflower, and I thought that was a great description of it. And the last thing I want in the middle of my water is a cauliflower. Now, I wouldn't mind it if I were painting a hill or if I were painting something with texture, but in a sky or in water where I'm looking for translucency and transparency, that's really not where I want a cauliflower. So that's why you have to pay attention and why you can't walk away. And if you do, most times you're going to pay a price, I've found. So we've got that going. What I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this. wash and bring a little bit of it down into this area here, because it does get a little, it does get a little green in here. And then it starts to, as it gets close, it starts to pick up the beach color. So I get a mix.
What color are you mixing?
I'll tell you in a second. It's my beach color.
Dirty palette?
Always dirty palette. But I was a little more, because I'm doing this for you all, I'm being a little more thoughtful about it. Basically what it is it's it's cadmium orange, alizarin crimson, dioxazine violet. I can never get that one right. It's Windsor violet. It's Windsor violet, and everybody's got a different name for it, but it's either dioxazine or diazazine. I can never remember. It's one of those, but it's basically Windsor violet. Cheap Joe's has it, and he calls it something romantic, and I'm not really sure what it is, but that's what you're looking for. And I find it to be a very valuable color because I use it as a complement, and it kills most of my oranges and my reds and my yellows. So I didn't really talk about my palette because I didn't really want to bore you with it, but if you're interested, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I use what is called something I forgot. It's basically the colors of the rainbow, and it was just yeah, I know, it's terrible. I forget everything. I'll remember before this is over. No, I can't do it now. Anyway, it's basically a warm and a cool of each of the primaries. So it's a warm yellow, a cool yellow, warm red, a cool red. Blue, I have several blues because cobalt blue is an almost perfect blue, and phthalo blue goes towards the green side, and ultramarine blue goes towards the red side. So I have 3 of those. The rest are just convenience colors. Like I use cadmium orange because I don't really want to mix cadmium red and cadmium yellow. You know, it's a waste of time. So some of these things I will mix. I will buy in tubes. It's a great way of teaching color theory because you really there are no earth colors on my palette. You just make them all, and it really teaches you how to. It comes from the Ridgewood Art Institute, and that comes from the Art Students League. Goes all the way back to the American Impressionists of 1903. So it does have some history, and eventually I'll remember the name of it. So that's basically, it. I use black as a temperer. I never use it as a color, but I mix it if I need to neutralize a color quickly, and I'm getting into trouble with the complement, because the complements, none of this is exact. It's light theory, and in light it works perfectly. But in paint, it doesn't always work so perfectly because there are other factors involved. So if I get into real trouble, I'll use ivory black or neutral tint to kill a color pretty quickly and to neutralize it and make it a more natural color. So I've got this going now. Okay. So here we go. I have the same, I want to see what I've got here, because I know what it was when I mixed it. That's not too bad. Okay. So I know what it was when I mixed it. So I'm just going to take it and I tend to use X's. I think it's a good way of putting paint on. And it also, I end up with some white spaces that I don't, that just happen by accident, and I find that they're helpful. They make it more interesting, and so I've got a couple of them, and I'm just gonna leave them there. Now this is a time where so I've got a graded wash, more or less. Now what I want to do is add, I want to make it a graded, well, the other one, variegated wash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little ultramarine blue, and I'm going to put that in there. A little cobalt blue. I like cobalt blue. And I'm going to put a little violet. Because I've got a reflection of this, so I want to get some violet in there. And that may be too much. And then a little bit of alizarin crimson. And cadmium yellow. Just because. And then some water. Just to muck it up a bit. That's too much, so I don't want that. Hey, isn't this fun? Yes. It's like being a kid. Now I do the same thing I did with the water, my base coat, and I'm just running it around. And now I'm going to let it. See how it starts to fill in, and it kind of granulates a little bit. That's a nice effect, I find anyway. And since I'm painting sand, that's an added plus. Now I want to make sure that this ties together a bit. I'm just letting it run back and forth. I know you can't see it, but again, I'm trying to get it to settle down into the paper. Okay. Some places I see that might be a little too strong or have a hard edge, and I'm just looking for that. So I go after that. Okay. I think what I'm going to do is start painting the posts before I go in and paint some of the, finish off the water and then finish off the beach, so that at least you get to see each of the ways of applying paint. This is simple. This is just, I call it monkey work. And all I really have to do, I want a gray. So I tend to mix back things in. I take my colors and I mix them back in to a wash, and that way I don't ever worry about triads and whether things are gonna hold together from a color point of view. If I'm always mixing things back, they all belong together, so they don't get too far out of context with one another. So I'm going to take this green. I'm going to need that again, so I'm not going to completely mix it in there. And then I'm going to take some, I've been using ultramarine blue, so I'm going to use some ultramarine blue in here. And then I want some orange in here, because that will too much. Okay, I've got a reasonable gray, and it's gonna. Am I okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
When did you see your palette?
Excuse me.
Just keep going. I'm trying to get more
Okay.
here.
So what I've done is I've made my grays by mixing back in the colors that I've been using all along. So I'm not going to have, a harmony problem. And if I want to cool it off a little bit, I'll just add a little more blue. And if I want to warm it up a little bit, I'll just add a little more orange, and it will go into a browner gray. prismatic palette. Gee, they're not going to be shoveling dirt on me yet. A prismatic palette. That's what this is. That's what this is called. A prismatic palette. And it doesn't have any earth tones on it, except that I cheat a little bit and I have burnt sienna because I love burnt sienna, and it makes great grays with ultramarine blue. So I'm not orthodox about anything. So I got myself a, look at that, isn't that nice? I mean, you know, got a nice gray color there, so. Now, my light's coming from here, so, and it's mostly from the top, so the reason I mention that is it's always important to remember where your light is. Don't forget that, you know. And I know that my light is mostly on the top. The rest of it is sort of in indirect light. So when I do this, now basically what I've got, I've got a nice neutral wash on it, but I'm not going to leave it alone because I want to have some variation. So I'm going to put some orange in it, and I'm going to put some cadmium lemon in it, which will give it a bit of a green cast and make it look like this green stuff from the ocean catching up with this. So I have a little of that in there. And I could use a little red in there too. So this is my variegated washes. And so I use a flat wash first, but that's not the end of the story. Then I start charging it with different colors. And it makes it more interesting. Even usually the colors will disappear, or often they will disappear. Sometimes they won't, but it for the most part doesn't matter. And if I see something that I don't like that's awfully red, so I say, well, what's the opposite of red is green. So I go get a little bit of green, and I throw a little bit of green. And that will kill the red. I'm a great believer in using complementary colors to tone down the other color. And what it makes it, frankly, it makes it more interesting. I think I need a little bit of light in there, so I'm just going to go back in and lighten it a little bit in a spot, just because.
Can't see that.
Can't see that.
Am I in you?
No, it's not your fault.
Did I move?
Camera, no.
Is it going down towards you?
You need to,
There it is.
Okay.
Bravo.
So now this is also a time to take my reflections while I'm doing this, because I want the reflection to be similar in color. And so I'm going to just take a little bit of and pull it down. So I'm kind of I'm getting my reflection to work with the object that is reflecting technically it's supposed to be lighter and less colorful, you know. You could do that if you really needed to. I don't really care. I mean, if I cared, I'd blot it a little bit and kill it. It's probably not a bad idea. Yeah, it's a good idea. Look at that. Okay. Gives me a little bit of value change. And you really need changes in watercolor. It's really critical. You know, watercolor is nasty if you don't get it to change in value, change in color. That to me makes all the difference in painting with watercolor. And it's kind of hard to get your mind around that because you've got to be thinking about it while everything's drying the wrong time, you know, so. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one. And this one I want to be a little bluer. Only because I want a color change. So this one's a little cooler. There's my basic. Did I learn something? Yes. That's better. Okay. I'm going to put some orange in it because it's so blue. I'm going to let that run. I'm going to go get my safety brush and put some lights in it. And get my last one. It's even bluer, but I don't know. Oh, I know. I've got a lot of. Okay. Now some of this I can also go back when I'm finishing and change some of this. So it's not the end of the world. None of this is the end of the world. It's all the only thing that's critical are the first washes. Because you can't really, if you make a mess with them, you're dead. You can't fix that for the most part. Everything else I can fix. I can wipe out, I can paint over, I can make into another shape. I can get away with murder. So, but that's the one place I can't fool around. This, by the way, is what's left of the bumblebee plant in Astoria, Oregon. It burned down a number of years ago. And when I was there looking for the bumblebee plant, because I had worked on that account, and I'd never been there. But I don't know if you ever saw the bumblebee on the beach and all the kids singing, "Yum Yum Bumblebee." I'm the culprit. So anyway, so I wanted to see what the place looked like. And by the time I got there, there was nothing left. Except for these pilings all over the place. And I actually thought they were very nice, so I took a lot of photographs of the pilings. Again, I'm not going to leave that. I'm going back to get some orange and put a little orange in there. Maybe I'll put a little orange in here too. A little bit up there. See how much fun? You just do it. And if it doesn't work out so well, you'll catch it in the end, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. So that's pretty good. How am I doing? I just hit an hour, so I gotta pick this up. Okay, this is dry. This is too much. Okay, a little bit, okay. Go too far, you can always take it back a little. Shadows and reflections are stronger closer to the object, and they get lighter and more diffuse as they move away. So that's why I'm blotting the bottom of that, so it's not, like another pole. Now, let's see. Okay. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of beach texture. So we've done some graded washes, we've done some variegated washes, we've done some wet on dry washes. This is my mask. Kind of works,
Is that wet or dry? It's dry.
What's that? I think it's all dry. Well, we got a little texture in it. Okay, what did I do with my toothbrush? Okay, I got my toothbrush. Gotta have a toothbrush. So what I'm going to start with is just this. And I'm going to take some of that. Some of it's going to be. It varies. The farther away you do it, the bigger they get. The closer you do it, the smaller it gets usually. And if it gets in the way, you just blot it a little bit because it's not the end of the world. And so I do a little bit of that. I get a little bit of violet. Do a little bit of violet in there. A little bit of alizarin crimson, just because. By the time it dries down. So I got a little bit of that in. And the other thing you can do, although I don't think it's really necessary in this particular case, is you can go, I'm sure you've all seen this, but I'll just remind you, you can go and tap one brush into the other, and that gives you some speckling. See, it worked. I'm not in trouble yet. Okay. Now I did do a little thing here, but that's okay. I want it to be a little darker in here anyway. And because it's wet, and it'll just take it. And I'm using the paint. You got to be careful when you do that, though. You got to make sure that the paint that you're putting in it is drier than the paint that you put it into. And if you do that, it works. If you don't do that, you end up with a cauliflower. So, I mean, that's where cauliflowers come from. Extra water that you don't need. So, here we go. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do water. Now, water is like kids do, they do this. That's all you really have to do. Except you have to connect them together and pull them out. But it's that simple, I find. So we'll try a little bit of it. It helps to have a square brush is helpful with this particular thing. So I go back in to my green, and I think I want it a little darker. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to bring it over to here, and then I'm going to let it come down like this and go over here. Now the key here is to go back and soften the edge, and then I'll pull some of those little things off that I was just talking about. The little things that kids use to make water. But the trick is to connect them to each other. And if you connect them, you get away with murder. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of color in it so it's not all the same thing. And it's starting to look like water, I hope. See these things? This is what, all it is a back and forth motion, what kids do, and then I connect them. So I got a couple over here. And a little bit over here. Want it to be a little greener. And you see, you can go on with this forever. As long as I connect them and don't leave them hanging out there by themselves, they look like water. It's amazing, huh? I think it's amazing. Always good to soften part of it. See now, you see how those lights that I wiped out earlier they disappear, but they start to give it life that it didn't have or it wouldn't have if I hadn't done that. Okay. Okay, I think it's time for me to take the, let's see. Right, like that. Okay. Now I start taking some of this stuff off, and we'll see what happens. Here we go. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Always amazes me. Okay. So now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to do accent colors and just an accent, darken the whole thing a bit where it needs some darkening. So I go to my violet because it's a good dark color. I put some cadmium orange in it, so it's not so purple. And I guess that's good enough. So I've got, this one is darker over here. So I want the water stains to be on it. So I'll have to, so it's getting, now I have to show you this just because I don't really have to use this, but this is an Alvaro Castanet liner brush. And it's, you can see it's got a body so it holds water, so it holds more water in it, and it comes to a real fine point. And I thought it was just brilliant, so I bought it from him. Now I'm going back in and I'm doing a little bit of calligraphy. So now I've got some of my
What are you putting on there?
excuse me?
What are you what are you painting on there now?
What am I painting on there?
It's just paint, not ink.
Yeah, no, it's all paint. It's all the same stuff. I mix everything from the same place.
No, it's a brush that acts like a calligraphy pen, but it's a brush using paint. The question was whether it was you were using calligraphy ink.
No, no, this is just, it gives me thick and thin lines so I can make it look a little more interesting. Go back in here and this also. And now I'm doing a little bit of dry brush, another way of applying paint. And more or less, that's about it. One of the things that I like to say at the end of these presentations is sometimes I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, not demonstrating, but painting since maybe I was 5 or so. And sometimes I say to myself, what on earth am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm not Picasso. I'm not, Jeff Koons or, why do I do this? And something Martha Graham said, I thought was the explanation for it. And what she said was that there's only one of you, and that if you don't express who you are, that is lost to the world for all time. And she says it's up to you to keep the channel open. And it's not for you to determine how good it is, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is for you to keep it yours. And I thought that was a brilliant explanation of why we all do this. So thank you very much. I have quarter-sheet demonstration paintings that I do that I sell for $40 a piece. If you like any of them, you're welcome to them. It's part of my paint and paper fund. My pleasure. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Good job.